Welcome to Drafting Out Loud. Today we're looking at the underdog market movers here on the Leverage Lab. There's lots of chatter out there about these players rising, and I recognize a lot of these players from other analysts' YouTube clips. We're going to dive into those today for some of the players and highlight them. First up, we're going to Zay Flowers. We got Jay Zachariason talking about Zay Flowers here. He was doing some comparisons. He said that these wouldn't impact his draft rankings, but it sounds like they will for Zay. Let's take a look.
I think Zay Flowers is one of the best picks you can make at wide receiver. So you get DeAndre Hopkins 2017 as his top ceiling comp, which is 80 similarity score or better. But just outside that is Jackson Smith and Jigba's 2025 for Zay Flowers. Like there's so many good comps and so many of the trends that I look for in this range of the draft. Zay Flowers checks that box. So I'm moving him up my rankings. I honestly think I'm to the point where he probably deserves to be more in that Devontae Smith, Chris Olave tier than the Luther Burden, Lad McConkey, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin type tier. Like I think there's a very real chance in that with a new, like the biggest wild card is new offensive environment, but I think that new offensive environment might be a good thing for Zay. So yeah, I mean like the DeAndre Hopkins comp very much aligns overall ADP and NFL year, all that kind of stuff, and his PPR points per game that year. DeAndre Hopkins was 20.7. I don't know if we get that high with Zay because he hasn't been that much of a red zone threat. But if the switch and offensive coordinator, like part of the reason is that he just has not been deployed in the red zone like at all. And if that changes in any way, there's definitely a ceiling there for Flowers. So I'm in on Zay this year. I think he's a good pick, and I got to move him up my rankings.
Yeah, and we've talked about the other offenses, but
Okay, like you guys heard from JJ Zachariason, he is moving Zay Flowers essentially from the um, end of the third round or the last quarter of the third round up until like the middle, the first quarter of the third round. He's putting him closer to Devonta Smith, who's at the very beginning of the third round right now, 26.8. So I'd expect him, like if everyone is drafted based off of his rankings, see Zay Flowers moving up the boards here. And it makes sense what he's saying. He isn't. There's other analysts out there that don't see the upside on Zay Flowers, but they see like a consistent player who can, score you points. JJ makes some interesting points that if Zay actually does get deployed in the end zone more often as a touchdown threat, then that would totally hype up his fantasy points. So, I think he is a good pick here at 31. I've been drafting him here, and I'm not afraid to draft him higher if he rises. Next up, we got Terrence Ferguson, and this is not a YouTube clip, but this is the best I could find on what I was hearing. And essentially, starts with Nate Atkins from The Athletic, and he's saying that Terrence Ferguson could be deployed essentially as a number 3 receiver for the team, and then have the other tight ends playing more tight end roles. That's, maybe an exciting spot for Terrence Ferguson if he's mixing in there as very much a pass catching threat. And we know that the Rams aren't afraid to play 2 and 3 tight end roles. If he can be on the outside and either the Rams are forcing other teams to play a heavy personnel, and then Ferguson has an advantage against a slower linebacker or a smaller like safety or cornerback or something like that. Or if they do play the cornerback and they want to run it, of course, then he's a great blocker in that one as well. So it's making the Rams harder to cover against by having such an athletic, dynamic tight end as a receiving threat and as a blocker against inferior run stoppers. And if that gets him on the field, I think that's awesome for Terrence Ferguson. There's a lot of concern as far as who is going to be on the field at tight end. Will it be Parkinson? I guess Higbee, Max Clare. And if this kind of just confirms that Terrence Ferguson is going to be on the field more, that makes him a great pick late in the draft, if you ask me. I have drafted him a decent amount, and there were a couple of drafts where I just like clicked him every single time. And I was like, oh man, this could look bad by the end of the year. seeing reports like this make me feel better about taking Ferguson as like my number 3 tight end when I was running low on tight end options. And he is rising up the boards because of it. 2 picks in the last 2 days, half a round in the last 7 days, basically. So the move has just started because of some of this speculation, is what it sounds like, more than actual news. Next up, we have Quentin Johnston. I don't think I put in that order, but let's see if we can find the Quentin Johnston. Thought this was an interesting one. That's not Quentin Johnston. This is Quentin Johnston. So I've on record saying I don't understand the rise, but this is the first person that actually explained it in a way that I thought was interesting and something I could kind of sink my teeth into a little bit. Let's hear what Zane has to say.
Talk about Quentin Johnston, because the thing when McDaniel came over, the first thing that intrigued me about Johnston is like he was a great back player in college. And we know that really Mike McDaniel is a king of scheming up those sort of looks for that type of player. And maybe Quentin Johnston isn't this complete NFL receiver that can do everything. But I do wonder if in this scheme, just accentuating the things that he does really well, this might be a really good fit.
Yeah, what's interesting is that his profile from the previous seasons is that he was basically not necessarily 100% a sacrificial X, but he did a lot of the deep work for the team. And so if you really think through that, this could be a really drastic role change for him. If they're able to bring his like A-dot down, his A-door down, all sorts of different things like that, this is essentially like a completely different role for him. He's not playing the same like deep threat role that he would, which would be really, really strong for fantasy. And I think that he can excel in that. I think I posted some charts yesterday about like his targets per route run on throws that are within 2.5 seconds, and his yak and different things like that. Like his yak isn't as strong as Ladd's in the past because a lot of the plays that he has are not designed to have as much yak on the play. What I think may end up happening in this exact situation, Quentin Johnston's not a great like man coverage separator. That's just not what he's done. So what I kind of envision, if you were to compare it to an offense, I don't think it's as similar to Miami, but I might consider it more similar to the 49ers, where you had Ayuk as like the separator, and then you had Debo as like the zone like underneath. Let me just kind of break tackles and do stuff.
Yeah, no, I love this call out. We've seen some of these now. Typically, wide receivers do own their.
Okay, so there's Zane on Quentin Johnston. And I thought that was an awesome take that he had right there. Some of the things that I've mentioned in the past were kind of what he mentioned as far as the downside goes, and that Quentin Johnston isn't really beating man coverage at all. He's not a great route runner. He's not a great hands catcher either, not a great catcher basically at all either. And so if he's just running deep routes or asked to do something outside of his comfort zone, I don't see how this really justifies him rising up the boards. Also, Trey Harris in college was the deep guy and proved he could do it too. So why is Quentin Johnston rising up the board so with so much conviction when Trey Harris could be that dude instead? But Zane there makes a good point that maybe Quentin Johnston is going to be deployed in a completely different way. He's going to be getting more underneath routes, and maybe he's going to get deployed in a way where he's not expected to beat man coverage at all, but he's expected to, I guess, get into the zone for zone coverage and then get some yak after that. We do know, and I'm not a college guy, but kind of reminiscing about his college profile when he was coming out and what other people have, analyzed and said, is he was creating a lot of yards after the catch on short catches. And even in college, he wasn't going up and getting the contested balls and things like that. So if he can get unlocked underneath, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Ladd's also kind of underneath a bit too. So we'll have to, and he's on this list too. At the bottom, we'll look at him a little bit here too. A little bit of an older clip, but it's one of my favorite ones, I think. And I just tried to maybe grab a little section of that. That being said, maybe we got to click him a little bit more, or especially when he falls a little bit. So there we go. T. Higgins is next, rising up just a little bit, a pick in the last 7 days. And you can see the rise has been very recent for him. All of it's been essentially very recent for him. Cool. Listen to what Ron Stewart has to say. And I think I brought up this point. I've heard other people bring it up as well. I definitely didn't create it, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's comparing him to other receivers that might be the flavor of the day. Let's hear.
I feel like, and this isn't, I don't want to start by like tearing down George Pickens, but that's kind of what it was last year, right? We were drafting T. Higgins at the 2-3 turn. Pickens went later. It's like, oh, you can get like the same bet in the Dak Prescott offense next to CeeDee Lamb. And this year we've kind of done a 180 on that, where if you look at last year, 14 game sample for both T. Higgins in games with Jamar Chase, so that's like pretty much every game, 12.6 PPR points per game. George Pickens with CeeDee Lamb, 12.57 half PPR points per game. And that was last year in kind of a lost season for the Bengals, where the Bengals didn't even have Joe Burrow the entire season. And still, T. Higgins was there. Because kind of like you're saying, in half PPR, it really is that simple. It is touchdown upside. T. Higgins is a guy who scored 21 touchdowns in his last 27 games. And you can say some of that is touchdown luck, but also whenever Joe Burrow is healthy, he has been, in terms of the Bengals passing offense, this is 2021, 2022, 2024. They've been tied for seventh, tied for second, and first in passing touchdowns. So they're always going to be there. And you can get him after these guys where I love Zay Flowers, I love Garrett Wilson, but projecting them for like their median outcomes are probably like 7 or 8 touchdowns. For T. Higgins, he scores 10 plus in down years where he misses like 4 games. And we've already seen next to Jamar Chase where he's had a top 5 season. And then you also always have, and look, we all want Jamar Chase to play 17 games, but like God forbid something happened to him. T. Higgins all of a sudden is someone that you're ranking every week as like what, like the wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5 in projection.
Okay, there we go with Ron Stewart's take on T. Higgins, and he was kind of talking about maybe a little bit more over someone like Zay Flowers, and right now they are going relatively close, 31 and 33, and again they're both on the rise at the same time, 1.1 for both of them over the last 7 days, and I do think also it makes sense. Some of the running backs that are going in that range, they're not the most exciting running backs. They might even be on the fallers list. It would kind of make sense. Let's see. Breece Hall on the fallers list, so maybe he's getting drafted ahead of Breece Hall. I do like Breece Hall, though. Let's see if any of the other ones are on there. There's Garrett Wilson. He mentioned that he liked them more than Garrett Wilson. So the other running backs aren't on the fallers list, but it's interesting to see these guys rising. T. Higgins, basically, it makes sense, right? He and George Pickens, there's not a whole lot different. They're both kind of number 2s on awesome pass heavy teams. It's just that George Pickens performed better last year, so he's going higher. I do think that George Pickens' role changed a little bit last year and that he was starting to get some more of the short yardage throws, not just all deep downfield throws, and that unlocks a higher upside for him. That being said, T. Higgins kind of has maybe something similar. I'm not sure what his route tree is exactly, but he's done it over multiple years where when he has his great year, he is the guy at the 2-3 turn. And so why shouldn't he be there with George Pickens, essentially? I think all these guys just got to get smushed more, and you want to kind of jumble them up a little bit and grab them where you can. Take advantage of the market. So if the market's letting T. Higgins slide, see if you can push him and get a more unique combo, because T. Higgins was falling to the 4th oftentimes, and I did grab him there a number of times if I'm not mistaken. So T. Higgins is a player that is on Ron's radar, and he's on my radar, and he should be on your radar as well, especially over some of maybe the running backs that aren't nearly as exciting in that range. Okay, we got I think one more player, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we got 2 players actually. Jonathan Brooks is next.
I'll kick one off if we want to get started.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll kick it off with Jonathan Brooks isn't getting cheaper.
That's a good one.
So we just took spoilers for the minisodes, but I think this one is out or will be out soon. But in the 7th round of the main event, we were kind of in a flat spot of the slow main event that we're doing with ship chasing, and wanted a receiver. There was a receiver that we were thinking about pretty strongly there, just reaching for, and I was like, basically like what I like to do in these minisodes, I kind of float stuff. So even if I don't like fully think we should do it, like let's talk through this, let's talk through that. What do you guys thoughts on this? What do you guys thoughts on that? So one of the ones I floated was Jonathan Brooks. Like, hey,
just you, building your.
Okay, well, we're not going to listen to the commercial, and that was about what we needed right there as far as that goes. There wasn't a lot of substance, but is why like he specifically should be going higher, other than he's not getting cheaper, and they took him in the 7th round. Now, it wasn't a best ball draft, it's a little bit different, and so you can argue that changes when you should draft him. But let's say there's a little bit more translation to it. And he argued later on in the clip that there is a little bit more translation to it, even though they are different formats. 7th round is like what is that? 7th round is pick 84 is the end of the 7th round. And so you're talking about he's getting up closer to the Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson's range, jumping people like RJ Harvey, Rico Dowdle potentially if he was to have something like that happen. And so that and right now he's going all the way down here too at like 104, but he is rising as we know because he's on the sheet here too. So there wasn't a whole, he was the number one conviction for him. If you go based on which one was brought up first, it was Jonathan Brooks. I'll also note that Pat Crane, that's who's speaking there, he was down on Jonathan Brooks when he was in the 140s and the 120s. Thankfully, I drafted him some, not a whole ton, but drafted him some in that range. Probably overweight, but definitely been drafting me even more now. I don't know why I wasn't drafting him even more later on or earlier. I guess I just you just don't anticipate the rise until the rise happens type of thing. But I don't think it's going to stop. So I do find him interesting at this point still, and I'm drafting him here until he rises, and then maybe that's when you switch off on like something like Blake Corum or something like that, possibly. But a lot of Jonathan Brooks right now, he's not getting cheaper. He could end up being the number one or just a super strong number two, which is what Blake Corum is in that range as well. So there you go on Jonathan Brooks, still rising up the boards, and he's had a lot of rise already built in, right? As we can see, 11 picks here, and it's definitely more than that more than the last 30 days. Last but not least, we got Ladd McConkey here. This one's a little bit older clip. It's from Matt Harmon.
So maybe he gets some of those looks, but when they get to like 12 and 21, and like there are situations where there's two receivers on the field, not just necessarily one receiver on the field.
Yeah.
I think that Ladd's going to just absolutely like cook in that intermediate area that you mentioned there off of play action. Herbert's really good at throwing the football there, and like the separation from Ladd is just fantastic. He cleared the 87th percentile in success rate versus man, zone, and press coverage. He did dip back a little bit in press coverage success rate, but like, oh boohoo, he fell from literally a 98th percentile success rate as a rookie to an 89th percentile result, where he actually saw more press. And in the meantime, he improved from year one to year two in success rate versus man and zone. Like, this is without question, I think he already established as one of the better route runners and separators in the NFL right now is Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So that's a little bit of what he had to say on Ladd McConkey right there. And so maybe some concern as far as his rookie year, a little bit of a flash in the pan. He's not going to be able to do it the second year type of thing. And I think what he's saying is that he actually improved on his second year, and now he's in a better situation, and Keenan Allen's not there to take his routes away. Now, I guess you could argue, well, now you got Ladd McConkey kind of running those intermediate routes. You have Quentin Johnston running some of those intermediate routes. Maybe the benefit is that Ladd McConkey can definitely beat the man coverage, as they mentioned in that clip, while Quentin Johnston isn't capable really, at least hasn't proven yet, that he can beat the man coverage easily. And so maybe they do complement each other really well. Ladd McConkey, if you were to listen to the whole video, is also pretty darn solid on the deep routes also, so isn't only an underneath player, but can win at all the levels on like all the routes essentially. Press, zone, man, everything. So I do think he's a really exciting pick. Got him way late in some DraftKings drafts. I think they may have been pre-draft or like right after the NFL draft. But I felt a little uneasy taking him so much because I wasn't sure what he's going to be able to accomplish this year based on how kind of unexciting year two was. But with Mike McDaniel there and hearing some of the things that he has to say there, gets you pretty hyped about him. And I definitely am taking him in the third round. Or if he gets to the fourth, definitely taking him in the fourth round. Right now, it is a little tough because there are times where you can like have to decide between like Ladd McConkey and Josh Jacobs or Cam Scatabo or something like that. And I did have one draft like that, and I ended up taking Ladd McConkey, if not mistaken, in that one. I think it's just a safer play with a lot of upside in that offense. Well, there we have it. Some of the risers for the day. If you can also see who the fallers were and who the values were. We're not hitting that on that today. Let me know what you think about this format. See you on the next one. Peace.